and welcome to The Bottom Line on TVP World. This is where we unpack some of the main business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Marie Cato. European countries have come together having understood that the US is no longer a reliable ally and that the state of the continent's defense is in tatters. But to agree on the matter is nowhere near enough to successfully deliver on change. Let's take a look at Jan Kennedy's feature report.
It's no longer a question of when, but rather how. European countries have taken urgent steps to boost their arms production capabilities after it became clear that the US will no longer guarantee their security.
We hope with our partners here in the Franco-German industry to supply equipment, weapons, security and armament equipment, as we do here, for much greater risks and in much greater quantities.
Last week, Germany's parliament passed a historic bill to increase borrowing capacity, a move intended to wake the country's defense sector from hibernation.
Zum Teil ganz neu wieder aufbauen.
We have to rebuild our defence capabilities, partly from scratch, using a technology-driven defence and procurement strategy with automated systems, with autonomous European satellite surveillance, with armed drones, and with many modern defence systems.
The European Commission wants to drive the bloc's rearmament efforts and proposed a major initiative now called Readiness 2030.
We must buy more European, because that means strengthening the European defence technological and industrial base. That means stimulating innovation here in Europe. That means creating an EU-wide market for defence equipment.
The plan is set to mobilise a combined 800 billion euros. 650 billion euros will be made exempt from the member states' deficits in a bid to increase spending by 1.5% of GDP. 150 will be offered in low-interest loans, nearly two-thirds of which will have to be spent on EU-made equipment. But experts are sceptical that the 800 billion will indeed be mobilized.
Rather than focusing on an 800 billion euro defense budget, the realistic figure is between 150 to 200 billion euros. The key question is whether the European defense sector can absorb this demand. In my view, 150 billion euros spread over several years isn't an overwhelming sum.
Because Europe has long relied on imports, primarily from the US, the list of necessary equipment remains extensive.
So we are still in a dependency toward the US when it comes to just transporting and making sure the logistics follows. Another domain when we are dependent is about, as we see in Ukraine, intelligence, especially when it comes to satellite intelligence. And another aspect, of course, will be about everything going from long-range artillery, with the example of HIMARS, to producing our own fifth generation of warplanes.
The plan's white paper suggests relocating arms manufacturing to Eastern Europe, potentially benefiting countries like Poland and the Czech Republic.
There is a general consensus that defense production should move to the eastern flank, but currently there is no clear plan on how to implement it. Whether procurement favors Western European firms or domestic manufacturers remains uncertain.
A separate matter is whether defense companies in the region, after years of underinvestment, can stand to the occasion. Maciej Miłosz gives an example of a troubled plan to expand ammunition production in Poland.
We are still stuck at the initial stage of selecting a foreign partner for the project. Despite the government having allocated sufficient funds for this investment, arms companies have yet to take advantage of them, even though the funds have been available for months.
However, it's not all doom and gloom, with the Polish industry capable of producing high-quality equipment. The list includes Crab cannon howitzers, the Borsuk infantry fighting vehicle, as well as the Rosomak armoured vehicle. Additionally, the country is one of the world's leading producers of the explosive TNT. It's also worth mentioning CSG, a major defense player in the region from the Czech Republic, which recently acquired a US-based ammunition maker. But perhaps the most pressing question is, how long will it take for Europe's defense industry to achieve self-sufficiency?
In many aspects, Europe could start producing the necessary equipment within 3 to 5 years. However, achieving full saturation of military forces will take longer. In more complex sectors, catching up with global military expertise could take up to 10 years.
However, as many politicians now agree, there's no other option.
So that's the state of Europe's defence. There's a sense of urgency and will to shell out additional funding, albeit it's not universal. Let's take a look at the situation on the other side of the equation in the defence business. And to tell us more, we are joined today by two experts, Albert Zimmermann, partner at Strategy and Germany, and Andrej Čirtek, spokesperson from CSG, a major Czech defence company. Good afternoon, gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Good afternoon.
So, gentlemen, right off the bat, a question to both of you. Can Europe's defence sector face the demand and make effective use of the additional defence spending? Albert, let's start with you.
Well, over the past years and decades, certainly there was a focus on the European defence side on specifically big and larger developments of solutions that are mostly gold-plated as well. That included also, as part of the peace dividend area, that we have seen major procurement orders being outsourced abroad, while the domestic industry has been left behind a little bit. So right now, the capacity and also the capabilities are lacking a little bit behind what would be needed immediately. That said, clearly the industry has realized that a step change needs to be happening and is scaling up already, both in terms of capacity and capabilities, in my view.
Andrej, what's your opinion on that?
If we use our company CSG as kind of case study, there are areas where we can quickly ramp up production, and then there are more complicated products where it is more difficult. If I speak about large caliber ammunition, we multiplied our production since the beginning of Russian aggression. We managed to deliver to Ukraine more than 1 million pieces of large caliber ammunition last year only. Not everything was our own production. It was also procurement from all over the world. But for example, in the case of large caliber ammunition, my belief is, based on our experience, that Europe can really quickly catch up. Regarding more complicated products like land systems, it will be more difficult. And if I look, for example, at tank production, it's good to remind that there is only one assembly line for tanks in whole Europe, and this assembly line is concerning Leopard tank, German product, which will be probably used in future by many other countries, including the Army of the Czech Republic, where we already use Leopards, and we are going to procure completely new ones. And Czech industry can become part of supply chain also in case of Leopard.
I wanted to ask about the years of underinvestment that we now see. These have translated into not being able to maintain the unused production capacity. Andrej, perhaps you could follow up for us on that, given that you're representing CSG.
Regarding capacities, capacities are closely related to orders, and where in a situation when there were very limited orders by NATO armies, of course, that European defense and industry focused on maintaining low production capacity. And of course, for example, in Czech case, we tried to do our best in finding export markets, which we managed to do quite successfully. But according to orders, especially long-term orders, companies are willing to invest in expanding production, even without any need for huge public support or EU grants or national grants. Companies just need to know that they have orders and then they can increase production. It's simple as that.
I wanted to just bring up a quote from Guntram Wolf of the Bruegel think tank. Ultimately, this comes down to the political will to put through orders rather than industrial problems. Albert, perhaps this might be a question for you, given your professional expertise.
Yeah, I think it's a very fitting quote here and at this part. Clearly, look, the European member states need to understand that they need to be strategically aligned and also committed on the demand side. Aligned means they should settle for a set of capabilities, long-term capabilities, and then bring behind this also the financial commitments. These financial commitments, as my colleague just said, cannot be only there like short term, but it needs to be really long-term commitments building on the strategic side of things. And if that political will is there, then it can also happen. On the second half of the equation, though, these large-scale investments and need to be met by high efficiency and availability of productive capacity. That is capital, labor, and also technology. And so far, what we've seen, especially in Europe, many times it looks more like an emergency response, more activistic in parts that now need to be, again, underlined by a strategic commitment in the longer term. It's also very important, and I believe from many conversations in the defense industry, it also needs to be seen that this is really a big opportunity for the industry. But it needs to be made sure that it's not being exploited now for profit-taking, this large budget, but really there to transform the industry and enable it also for the long term.
We have examples of massive, even tenfold increases in capacity. We have Rheinmetall that in 2022 they produced 70,000 of these 155 millimeter artillery shells. It's now up to 700,000 this year. In 2027, it's expected to be 1.1 million. I wanted to ask both of you your opinions. Is this realistic? Can we actually expect this much of an increase between now and then? Andriy, perhaps you could give us your thoughts on that first.
I think it's completely realistic, and we as CSG are not very far behind Rheinmetall in production of large caliber ammunition. I will not disclose our current capacity precisely, but also in our case, we are able to manufacture several 100,000 pieces of large caliber ammunition per year. And we are working very hardly to create vertically integrated chain for creation of large caliber ammunition from commodities like nitrocelluloses and gunpowder to final product. And for example, we would like to open TNT production or reopen TNT production in Greece. So it can become maybe the second only place in Europe after Poland where TNT is manufactured. So in case of large caliber ammunition, quick ramp up and multiplying of production in Europe is completely possible.
And Albert, what are your thoughts on that? Because, there is that element of, political leaders allocating very huge budgets, and then there's the practical element of, bringing those numbers into reality. What are your thoughts?
100%. I mean, the key challenges here, like in bringing it to life and to the real world, is actually, first of all, certainly the raw materials and the supply chains that need to be adjusted as well. There's still a lot of bureaucracy and regulation going on that's hindering these processes, especially when it comes to larger programs, so a little bit away from the ammunition space as well. We still have workforce and skill shortages in parts. This is also quite necessary.
And environmental regulations as well.
Environmental regulations, absolutely, 100%. Those play into this as well. So I love the optimism. I think the European industry has proven time and again that they can adapt quickly if needed. I see this realization that it is needed now happening quite a bit. So I'm trusting the industry in general. Hopefully the political will, as we mentioned before, can come behind this and cut through some of these regulatory aspects, and also the procurement agencies like OCCAR, like NETMA can play a role here, like the EDF, like PESCO can really help us on the demand side, aligning on everything, so that then industry can deliver against clear goals with a clear commitment financially and politically.
Just as we wrap up, I just wanted to bring up some intelligence, some Danish intelligence actually, a time frame that is relevant for European states. And an assessment by Danish intelligence is that Russia will start a major war in Europe in 5 years. I'm sure you're familiar with this. In 5 years' time, in your opinions, what can be done in 5 years' time in a practical context? If both of you could just give us some numbers, perhaps, or some kind of forecasts based on your professional expertise. Andrei, perhaps you could just give us something as we wrap up.
I will speak on behalf of defense industry. I will not comment or on build-up of armies. But regarding defense industry in Europe is able in 5 years to satisfy needs of Europe regarding large caliber ammunition, regarding land systems, be it tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, or artillery systems. Maybe the situation is more difficult in advanced high-tech systems like air defense systems or even fighter jets. But in general, Europe can really ramp up its capacities regarding defense industry in 5 years and get ready to maintain supply security of supplies of necessary equipment, even in case of civil crisis.
But in terms of numbers for a layperson like myself, what kind of in terms of artillery shells or tanks, how much can be produced in the space of 5 years?
Well, this is really difficult to say precisely, but if current capacity of European production of tanks is, let's say, around or up to 100 pieces, Europe should be able to multiply this in 5 years, but it depends on orders. Mm-hmm. There must be armies and governments issuing orders for delivery of hundreds of pieces of new land systems. And then defense industry will catch you fulfill such an order.
Okay, and Albert, let's assume for a second that member states will rally around the European Commission, that 800 billion euro spending plan. They actually start the tenders for new equipment. How much of this money is the European industry able to absorb and turn into deliveries, and in what kind of time frame? Let's just say those 5 years.
Yeah, I think they will absorb the entire amount within the time frame of 5 years. This should be possible. Quite importantly, I mean, the main goal of this entire exercise is certainly to avoid any kind of war and to deter any Russian aggression from widening in Europe. Therefore, I believe, strengthening the industry by consolidating it in a targeted way, also bringing the supply chains to a certain resilience level by strategic stockpiling, both of ammunition and also materials, by standing up the armies behind that. So it's a multiple effort that needs to be happening to achieve that goal. But again, we have seen the industry. We see now the latest development in industry, not only as my colleague described in the Czech Republic, but across Europe. We see that people and deciders, both on the political side as well as on the industry side, are really driving these developments right now. They still need to be accelerated. They still need to be more effective and more efficient. But under this pressure that we are standing right now in the global developments, also with the US retreating a little bit from their commitments towards Europe, I'm strongly believing that we can use that money well, again, to deter any further Russian aggression against Europe.
Okay, gentlemen, it's been great having you on the show. Albert Zimmermann, partner at Strategy and Germany, and Andrei Čirtek, spokesperson from CSG. ESG. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And that concludes The Bottom Line today. I was your host, Marie Cato. Join us every weekday afternoon at 5:10 CET on TVP World. And for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. And for more news and analysis, stay with us on TVP World. Goodbye.